tomorrow, negotiated on a bipartisan basis, and there's really important provisions in there that relate to fentanyl that all of us are affected by and the people we represent. And I'm so glad my colleagues are here. On April 2nd, the Justice Department announced the largest law enforcement seizure of fentanyl in the history of Michigan. April 2nd. 40 kilos of fentanyl were found, enough to kill every Michigan resident. Pretty serious stuff. On April 21, a Michigan medical examiner raised the alarm on a really bad patch of fentanyl, as he called it, and warned the public that there had been 6 overdoses in 11 days. These are 2 headlines from last month, and it does not come close to encapsulate the pain and tragedy of Michigan families who've faced this issue of drug overdoses over the years. So we know we're here because we want to combat the fentanyl crisis and give U.S. Customs and Border Protection the tools they need to stop the drug from coming across the border. And in this bill to combat fentanyl, the fentanyl crisis, it would invest in 2,400 more Customs and Border Protection officers, new and innovative equipment to increase detection, drug enforcement agency efforts to disrupt drug trafficking networks in Mexico, and enhanced lab analysis of fentanyl samples. So it has been 105 days. 105 days since a strong, not only bipartisan, you could say tripartisan bill was brought to the floor of the United States Senate that would make a real difference in what we are talking about today. And it's time for our Republican colleagues who keep going to the floor and saying, somebody should do something about the border. Somebody should do something about the border. Well, 105 days ago, they had a chance to do something. Tomorrow, they're going to have another chance, and we hope that they will join us in voting yes. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Senator Stabenow. In the 10 years between 2013 and 2023, New Hampshire lost 4,616 of our residents to overdose deaths. That's not just 4,616 lives cut short. It's families torn apart. It's children growing up without parents. It's parents losing children way too soon. Parents like Kay and Jim Scarponi from Kingston, who lost their son Joseph, a Marine Corps veteran, to an overdose. Or Muriel LaJoy of Concord, whose daughter at 22 died when she went into a relapse after overdosing. The overwhelming majority of these deaths are being caused by fentanyl. But whether it's fentanyl or cocaine or meth or other opioids, most of these illicit drugs are coming across our southern border. And anything we can do to cut down on the amount of fentanyl that's coming into the United States, we ought to be doing it. Because the reality is America's life expectancy has gone down, largely because of drug overdoses. And fentanyl remains a serious national health crisis, a national security problem. We can't allow this poison to be brought into our country by transnational criminal organizations. And as elected members of Congress, it is our duty to take action to keep these drugs off of our streets and to keep families safe. That's why we need to pass the bipartisan border deal. Now, there are a lot of things that I disagree with the majority of my Republican colleagues about, but this is one I agree on. We do need to address border security at our southern border. And that's what this legislation that we voted on 105 days ago and we're going to vote on again tomorrow would do. It would bring more resources to bear on the issue of fentanyl and other drugs. It would give significant increases in funding for CBP to deploy more non-intrusive inspection technology, going from about $400 million in the bill that we voted on 105 days ago to $2 billion for that intrusive inspection equipment, non-intrusive. It would provide Immigration and Customs Enforcement with increased funding to focus on counter-fentanyl investigations and enforcement. We need more boots on the ground. It would do that. And sadly, our Republican colleagues walked away from the bill 105 days ago for one reason, because Donald Trump said he wanted to campaign on the issue. He didn't want us to get something done for the benefit of Americans. Well, we have an opportunity again tomorrow to vote to put this legislation back on track. I hope our colleagues will join us. Senator Klobuchar.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Shaheen. Senator Schumer, I was just started. Do you want to say a few words before? Okay, very good.
All right. Senator Schumer, yes, all right, Senator Schumer. No, we're just getting started.
Okay, well, thank you, and I want to thank Senators Stabenow, Shaheen, Klobuchar, Schatz, Cortez, Masto, I got everybody, for organizing this important event. Senator Welch told me he might come in and join us as well, to talk about the need to pass our bipartisan border bill to crack down on the fentanyl entering our country. Tomorrow, senators will face an important decision. Will both sides come together to advance a bipartisan border security bill, or will partisanship get in the way once again? 3 months ago, Donald Trump told his Republican allies to block the strongest bipartisan border security bill Congress has seen in a whole generation. Luckily, we are trying again tomorrow, and I hope this time our Republicans join us to achieve a different outcome. Unlike H.R. 2, a partisan bill with no Democratic input, which got no Democratic votes when they first put it on the floor here, this bill was designed to get 60 votes and pass, which H.R. 2 was not. H.R. 2 was the truly political bill. Our bill had input from both Democrats and Republicans, which H.R. 2 can't claim. If anything's political, it's H.R. 2. So let's be perfectly clear. Our bipartisan border bill represents a real chance, in fact, the best chance in decades to act on border security. It will make huge strides in cracking down on the scourge called fentanyl. Every one of us in our states has talked to families who have lost, particularly young people, because of fentanyl, and it breaks your heart. Some of them didn't even know what they were taking had fentanyl, were dead within 24 hours. I've experienced that with some families. So we have to do something. And what would it do? It would deliver billions for DEA, for DHS, to hire officers, to focus exclusively on drugs, and billions for state-of-the-art equipment. We know how to stop this if we have the will to do it. And that would detect the flow of drugs at the border crossings and ports. Thanks to my Democratic colleagues who are here today. I thank them for highlighting how important this is for the bill. Our Republican friends are talking about the borders, close the borders, it has fentanyl. This bill will stop the flow of fentanyl in many large ways. Are they going to put their votes where their rhetoric is, or are they going to play politics? It's that simple. So I thank my colleagues for being here and look forward to moving this bill tomorrow on the floor. And just one final point. We don't expect every Democrat to vote for it. We don't expect every Republican. We want a broad bipartisan majority. We will get that among the Democratic side. We hope to get it on the Republican side, too. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Schumer, and thanks for your leadership. So I come at this as a former prosecutor, ran an office of 400 people for 8 years. And we would always say we want to be efficient in what we do, but we're not quite like a business because we don't want to see repeat customers. And one of the ways we know that we stop the cycle of repeat customers is making sure people don't have access to seriously dangerous drugs that has this, in this case, fentanyl, become a scourge on our society. In our state, we say one pill kills because we have had so many instances of teenagers who maybe went to the dentist, got a Percocet, decided, hey, maybe I want to get another one, go on the web, go on Snapchat, order a Percocet, most of this coming up through the border, and they literally take one pill and they die. This has happened over and over and over again. And this bill, we are now on 105 days, would have done so much when it comes to, yes, emergency powers to shut down the border, but also critical steps to take fentanyl out of our country. As someone from the northern border, you may wonder why Senator Shaheen and I are up here, but for us, it affects our state just like everyone else. These drugs, fentanyl, come up 35W in my case. We have things coming through the Canadian border, and because of the limited resources for customs right now, some of our border agents from the northern border have been assigned down to the southern border. We understand that, but that doesn't mean that this is a good way to handle this, when in fact we also have drugs and trafficking coming through the northern border. In Minnesota alone, fentanyl is involved in 92% of all opioid deaths. Police in my husband's hometown of Mankato, Minnesota, recently seized 6 suspected drug dealers, arrested them, and seized almost 6,000 pills. Minnesota's U.S. attorney announced that law enforcement just a bit ago seized over 30,000 grams of fentanyl pills when they busted one drug ring. That's enough fentanyl to kill the over 5 million people in my state. Just that one seizure. These aren't just numbers. Each one of these pills have killed or can kill a friend or a neighbor, mothers or fathers, sons or daughters. I'm thinking about Devin Norings from Hastings, Minnesota. I got to know his mom, 19 years old, when he took that Percocet laced with fentanyl. This cutting-edge technology for our border, this idea of getting more customs agents and taking this on in a big way is going to make a major difference. So I do not understand how our colleagues, particularly on the Judiciary Committee, on which I serve, can go to the floor day after day and talk about drugs or talk about the border and not being willing to actually do something about it. So we've got to get this done. I thank Senator Stabenow for putting this together. I thank my fellow prosecutor, Senator Cortez Masto, who understands that compassion isn't just closing your eyes and letting people die. It's actually doing something about it. So with that, I turn it over to the one guy that's broken the glass ceiling up here, Senator Schatz from the state of Hawaii.
Thank you very much, Amy. I do appreciate including me here. Look, Republicans have a choice to make. They can either demonstrate that they are serious about border security and stopping the flow of fentanyl, or they can demonstrate with their vote that they were never serious all along. They don't get to promise that they're going to crack down on fentanyl and then turn around and vote against billions of new dollars for law enforcement to do just that. So, spare us the crocodile tears. Vote for the thing that you say you are for. You asked for border security. You asked that we negotiate with James Langford. You asked for us to politically stretch and make sure that this bill was tough enough to get 60 or more votes. And in the 11th hour, Donald Trump intervened because he thought it would help if the border was in chaos. And although some of what I just said may sound like overheated partisan rhetoric, that is actually a laying out of the facts. And you don't have to trust my word. You can listen to Donald Trump himself. He said, "Blame me. Blame me." And so that was in the context of the Ukraine supplemental. And that was in the context of the House pretending that they were going to do some other kind of legislative action that stood a chance of being enacted. But now it is just this bill. It is the bill that they demanded that we negotiate. It is a bill that is fair to characterize as the toughest bipartisan border bill in generations. And so, if any Republican votes no tomorrow, then they forfeit their right to discuss the border and to turn it into a partisan political issue. We stand ready to actually fix this thing. We stand ready to work on a bipartisan basis. We did work on a bipartisan basis. And so tomorrow we have a chance to move towards enactment of something that will keep our communities safe. With that, I'd like to introduce Prosecutor Catherine Cortez Masto.
Thank you.
Thank you. I too want to thank both Debbie Stabenow, Jeanne, Shaheen, and all of my colleagues for being here. Let me just put a fine point on this. I don't want to repeat everything that you've heard because I absolutely agree with it. But here's the reality. Fentanyl is in every community, unfortunately. For 8 years, I worked with my law enforcement in my state to address the illicit drugs that were coming across the border. And unfortunately, it is still happening with fentanyl. For that reason, I went down to the border, and if you've never been to the Tucson sector, both Lukeville and Nogales, you should. And I asked my colleagues to go down there to understand, because if you go down to the border and you talk to the customs agents and the Border Patrol, right now they are overwhelmed and understaffed. And they are not able to do what they want to do, is address some of the drug trafficking that is coming across that border into our communities. So it's not just law enforcement in our communities that are doing everything to protect our families. They need help. And that means that we have to strengthen the southern border where we know those drugs are coming from. That's why this border legislation that we put up, this bipartisan legislation, included this crucial funding to address the fentanyl coming across the border. $2.74 billion to hire over 2,000 Customs and Border Protection officers and to bring in cutting-edge inspection technology to detect smuggled fentanyl. More than $23.2 million for the Drug Enforcement Administration to crack down on the cartels trafficking fentanyl across the border. You talk to any law enforcement on the border in your communities, you know what's coming across the border from the cartels. $25 million for programs to combat the flow of fentanyl into our country. That's in this legislation. So to my colleagues who are concerned about the drugs coming across the border and want to address it and strengthen the border, then they should be supporting this legislation. That's what it is about today. Unfortunately, there is one man who wants to take credit for killing this legislation. And that's Donald Trump, because he'd rather play politics with people's lives to benefit him. And that's not what this is about for all of us. This is about ensuring we're protecting our families. This is about ensuring we're giving the support to the law enforcement across this country to do the job that they want to do to protect our communities and make them safer. It is about addressing the drug trafficking. It is about addressing the human trafficking across the border, the drug weapons trafficking, the money laundering that is happening across our southern border. I know it. I've worked on those issues for 8 years as the Attorney General of the state of Nevada. It is unfortunately still happening. But I'll tell you what, unless we stand up here as Congress and show them that we support the work they're doing, they are going to get frustrated, and we're going to lose out on incredible law enforcement men and women who want to serve, because they are overwhelmed and understaffed. And our American communities and our families deserve better. I'm going to say one more final thing I've got to put on everybody's radar. It's not just the fentanyl that's coming across the border. It is the drugs that are being cut into the fentanyl. Right now, xylazine is a problem. There's illicit xylazine that is being cut with fentanyl that is having devastating impacts on our community. And we have to do something about that as well. I've introduced legislation to address the xylazine issue, and I hope my colleagues join me there as well. But at the end of the day, listen, if you're standing in the well of the Senate and you're advocating to strengthen our borders, then you better be talking to those men and women in law enforcement, particularly at the border, and you shouldn't be afraid to tell them why you're not supporting this legislation. But I can guarantee you, not one of my colleagues who voted against this is willing to do that.
Thank you so much, Senator Cortez. I know you have to preside, so we appreciate the fact that you are here. And let me just one more time, if it doesn't matter which border you're at or if you're in the interior of the country, this issue on deadly fentanyl affects all of us. That's why we are here, all of us. That's why we are here. And tomorrow it's very simple, very simple. Stop the speeches on the floor. Republican colleagues have a chance to do yes or no. Very simple. You want to stop the flow of fentanyl? Yes or no? Do you want to strengthen our border security in our country? Yes or no? And we hope that they're going to join us and vote yes. Happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Senator Jeanne Langford said he hasn't heard from reach out to him ahead of the vote tomorrow, or does like he fail? Do you plan on just reaching out to him to start those negotiations?
Well, I think, first of all, I have talked personally to Senator Langford about this legislation and encouraged him, as well as all of our colleagues, to do what they did, which was very tough negotiations, and just recently talked with him. And he didn't talk about renegotiating the bill, but I can't imagine at this point, after we have done all of this, I think the first question is, what's Donald Trump going to say? Is Donald Trump going to? Does he want to renegotiate this? No. He wants chaos at the border. And so, to me, we have the bill that was negotiated. Very tough negotiation, and I so appreciate and respect Senator Langford. But we have that bill. And so I think the next question would be, what is their leader, Donald Trump, going to say about whether or not he would allow them to vote on something new?
Hi, Senator. Some of your Democratic colleagues have come out against this legislation now that it's no longer attached to a supplemental, as they say it doesn't do enough to protect dreamers and whatnot. What's your response to them?
Well, from my perspective, and welcome my colleagues, we certainly do need to do more. I mean, dreamers have waited way too long, and their families have waited way too long. And if this was something that we could do, as Democrats on the floor of the Senate and get the 60 votes necessary, we want to do that. We absolutely want to do that. There's other areas that, of course, we want to do. We want comprehensive immigration reform. I was here in 2013 when we passed this huge bill that moved forward on all aspects of immigration reform on a bipartisan basis. And it's one of the tragedies, I think, that this never became law. So we certainly know, I respect and understand colleagues. I know that President Biden wants to do whatever he can administratively to be able to address these issues as well, because this is only one aspect. Stop the fentanyl, deal with the border security issue, but we certainly have issues with dreamers and families and people who have come here legally, or have come here, want to be here legally, and want to have the opportunity to be a part of America. So, yes.
Senator Stabenow said it well. We need comprehensive immigration reform, but that's not what this bill is. This bill is about border security. We need border security as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
So there are a couple of appropriators up here. Republicans have been very clear they're going to block this bill tomorrow. You talk about the funding for Border Patrol agents, fentanyl detectors, other things like that. Could you put some of those things into a domestic supplemental, or perhaps the year-end spending package if and when this fails tomorrow? To what extent can these things be addressed, or these priorities be funded through the appropriations process, supplemental appropriations process?
I'll just give you two thoughts. First of all, I'm sorry, you're the
No,
more senior
go ahead.
appropriator
Senior,
here.
yeah.
But two thoughts. First, I am not stipulating to how the vote is coming out tomorrow. I understand that that's how pundits feel. But I don't think we should move on from the fact that these guys demanded this specific thing and then changed their mind because Donald Trump wanted to kill it. I don't think that we should move on from the fact that we had a bill where the whip count was over 70, and then it collapsed because Donald Trump said, blame me. And so, no, I'm not going to necessarily entertain subsequent legislative actions, but I will say that the same dynamic will occur in the appropriations context, which is that anything that's actually tough on the border, anything that would actually work to slow or stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States is likely to be killed in the background by Donald Trump, who has made it explicit that he wants things to be as intolerable as possible for political reasons. And I don't think that we should accept that premise as a sort of baseline political weather, and what are we going to do about it? The question is, are there any Republicans who are going to stand up and say, that was then, this is now, this bill was always good, I was planning on voting for it, and now I'm going to take a stand and vote for it and vote my conscience? And so I'm angry because I got texts from my colleagues on the Republican side saying, look, you guys need to get serious about the border. You need to get serious, you need to stretch You need to empower Chris Murphy and Kirsten Sinema to really get into a negotiation. And some of the Republicans that I respect the most were really forceful with us. And so we listened. And so we developed a piece of legislation that I don't love, but I know is tough enough to get the job done. And yet they abandoned ship because Donald Trump told them to do so. And so I'm not over that, and they still have a chance to make this right.
Let me just add one other thing. President Biden has asked for additional resources at the border in every budget since he has been president of the United States, and they have not been willing to provide the resources, including the last round. So that is the question, as Senator Schatz said. What are they going to do? Not what are we going to do, not what the president's going to do, but what are they going to do to make good on all the rhetoric about how we have all these problems at the border? What are they going to do? We'll find out one step tomorrow.
Final question.
Leader Schumer announced also today he wanted to move on a contraception bill, making a federal right to that. Is this part of sort of a larger effort to kind of put Republicans on the spot or clarify their positions ahead of 2024, this bill and that bill?
Listen, I'm not going to speak to that here because that's a different issue. We're here to talk about the border security bill. Thank you all
right.
very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so, all right. Thank you. I mean, so it's step one.